So to start this video off, this isn't to argue with anybody, it's just showing everybody that the area that we're in, this is a very common practice, right? A lot of people had several negative comments to say about burning off our pastures, but here in South Central Missouri, it's a very common practice. It's not just because it's common I got it, and maybe it's not the right answer, but it's the best answer for this area that is the most cost effective. Good afternoon, everyone. So we had a lot of comments about the pasture burning, the prescribed burn. And I think what a lot of people don't realize is we live in South Central Missouri. And South Central Missouri has a lot of rocks. I say that because some people mention tillage, you know, like plowing it over or even disking it. And even disking it, if you go more than like an inch or so deep, you're gonna pull some rocks up. And not necessarily on purpose, obviously, but they're just there. And once you pull up one rock, they grow, and there's a million of them. So that's not an option for us. So you can see the pasture we're walking by right now didn't actually burn all that well. A lot of it burned off, but not all of it. So when you look at it, you can see like all this little brown stuff. It's actually sage grass, right? That stuff didn't burn off that well, but the grass itself is very tall. It's about 5 inches tall, 4 or 5 inches tall. And that's after we had 4 horses roaming this, that's about 20 acres, 20 acre pasture that they were in. The other thing is that we don't do this every year. We do it once.
Every 3 years?
Yeah, roughly. About every 3 years we burn it off. And obviously there's gonna be some benefit to it. There's also gonna be some drawbacks. But the benefits for us far outweigh the drawbacks. If we were to do tillage like others mentioned and disc everything over and reseed, we're looking at thousands of dollars between seed and then fertilizer to throw down. At that point, it'd be cheaper just to fertilize it and, you know, kind of hope that the grass gets a good hold and chokes the weeds out. It's kind of the purpose of burning the pastures like we did in the spring. So we do it right when right before the weather sets to where the grass is going to starting to grow. And once you do that, you really don't have to worry about too much of it. You know, the rains are going to come, but it's not going to erode away anything because the roots are all still there. It only burns off what's on the top. So like even this, we burned our ditch line and everything, right? And you can see how tall it is. Now, some of that is obviously not fescue, and that's kind of the goal of what we want. We want primarily fescue and like Timothy, all these cool season grasses, because then we get far more growing time in the year from it. And this is the area right here where the horses seem to hang out more, and they ate a lot of that grass down, but nevertheless, a lot of it came in, and it came in very well. We're gonna walk through our hayfield real quick and just show you a short little part of it, and then we're gonna continue on our walk. All right, so we're in our hayfield right now, and I want to show this spot right here specifically. This right here didn't burn off, and you can see that there's a lot of dead and dormant, most likely weeds or some summertime grasses that only grow when it's really hot. And the problem with this is that underneath it here, right, you can see all these little blades of grass that are trying to come up. Well, they're kind of getting screwed because all this brown and dead or leaves and stuff are blocking all the sunlight. Now they do provide a little bit of benefit. They would keep moisture in by having all this on top of it. And the other thing that they'll do is they'll actually so if the ground's not quite, you know, say it's like 60 during the day, it's only 40 overnight, the ground temperature needs to be about 55 degrees for grass to grow. Well, cool season grasses specifically, like fescue or Timothy. So this is essentially adding an insulation, and it does help keep heat in. But the problem is that look how small and short that grass is, right? Now we'll walk over here where it burned off well. So this all right here burned off very well. There was, and you know, when we burned, it was still a little damp, but it was just the only opportunity we had to still beat the springtime weather coming in and not get soaked again for weeks. So this right here is all about 6 inches tall, maybe a little more, but it's good and thick. You can see that, yeah, there is some bare spots in here, but that's actually because we do need to reseed or overseed our pasture, or sorry, our hayfield. We bought this last year and we knew that was something that was going to have to be done, but overall this is exactly what we're looking for. Now, those that were talking about microorganisms and stuff like that getting killed 3 feet under the soil, I honestly don't know much about that. What I do know is that I can look at my pastures and my hayfield and even the yields that I get, and I can tell you that this is what works for us, and it works very well. Now, if you're in an area like, say, Kansas or somewhere else that has much better quality soils, then yeah, you would probably be further off just throwing a little fertilizer down. But for me, I have to throw so much down that it costs me quite a bit. So to get a really good growth and to overcome the weeds and the residue that's left from last year's growth, I would have to throw down almost $400 an acre in fertilizer, and I just don't want to do that. Now with $400 an acre of fertilizer, I will get a lot of bales. I'll get probably about 6 to 8 bales an acre, but for essentially free, because it cost me about $20 in fuel between propane and and probably fuel for the side-by-side too. I will end up, we average about 4, sometimes 5, but generally about 4 bales an acre. So I can make up the difference by cutting again in the fall. And to cut 25 acres, I can do that on right around $150 in fuel. And it takes me 24 hours to do, so basically if I was to cut this whole hayfield, between cutting, raking, and baling, it's 24 hours and $150 worth of fuel. So then let's say I do it again in the fall, right? Another 24 hours and another $150 worth of fuel. And that was when prices were a lot higher. Now this coronavirus is making it to where our prices are quite a bit lower. We actually just filled up our farm tanks because they're so much lower. I'm paying not quite half, but pretty close to half of what I paid last year for my fuel. But granted, last year I bought it during the summer. I say all this because for us, the numbers, when we crunch them, it just makes sense and it works very well. Now, the years that we don't burn, yeah, a lot of times we don't necessarily go all out and spend a whole bunch of money on fertilizer, but we'll do soil tests, which we already did, and we know that we're low on phosphorus specifically, and we know that we're going to add some probably in the fall. We'll wait we'll wait a little bit just because our ground's so saturated. The soil tests are not necessarily as accurate because of that. So just things that we look at, and the amount of money that we spend in fertilizer is obviously cutting into how much I'm paying for my hay. Obviously I want good quality hay just like anybody else, because the more I make, the more I can sell. And then, you know, I'm essentially getting my hay for my animals for free then. So like I said, it's not for everyone, and it's not going to necessarily please everyone, but for us it works well, and that's what we're going to do. So those of you that enjoyed it, I hope it does help you with your prescribed burns, and I hope it is actually beneficial for you, and maybe you learned something. I learned a little bit too about the microorganisms, but for us it's just not as big of a concern. So thank you, have a blessed week, and we'll see you next time.